With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. 3 young French women, aged 18, 19, and 21, have been charged with criminal terrorist conspiracy after allegedly plotting suicide attacks in Paris to honor bin Laden and mark the 2015 Bataclan massacre. French intelligence discovered the suspects were radicalized Salafists who consumed jihadist propaganda online. The 19-year-old ringleader reportedly promoted ISIS material on TikTok and discussed targeting a concert hall or bar using explosives or firearms. Police seized notes detailing bomb ingredients and attack plans. All 3 were arrested following surveillance and remain in custody pending trial. The Senate voted 60-40 on Monday to pass a continuing resolution reopening the U.S. government after a 40-day shutdown, the longest in history. The bill funds operations through January 30, 2026, and includes 3 full-year appropriations bills. Democrats received little from the deal besides a promise of a future vote on Obamacare subsidy extensions. The compromise delivers back pay and job reinstatement for 4,000 federal employees, but deepened Democratic infighting. Critics say Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's strategy alienated both centrists and progressives, threatening party unity ahead of midterms. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk warned that global corporations, especially tech giants, have amassed unprecedented wealth and power, exceeding even national economies, and risk undermining the international law. He said unregulated corporate influence could subjugate others and urged tighter global oversight. Turk echoed Secretary General Antonio Guterres' frustration over the UN's waning relevance. Citing Elon Musk's trillion-dollar Tesla package and the rapid rise of generative AI, Turk said technology's shadow side threatens democratic focus and accountability unless restrained by human rights standards and international regulation. President Donald Trump's lawyers have threatened to sue the BBC for $1 billion, demanding an apology and retraction over a panorama broadcast that allegedly doctored his January 6 speech. A leaked BBC memo confirmed executives knew of ethical concerns but failed to act. Trump's legal team called the edit false, defamatory, and inflammatory, claiming it damaged his reputation and finances. The ultimatum follows the resignations of Director General Tim Davie and new CEO Deborah Turnus amid the scandal, which has plunged the British state broadcaster into crisis over bias and credibility.
To make one thing very clear, BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider. And if you'll excuse me,
why did you fail to deal with the mistakes that were made?
And see my teams. Thank you so much for being here.
Do you think that the journalists are corrupt, like President Trump says? Do you think the journalists
Of course our journalists aren't corrupt.
Residents of Crowborough, East Sussex, protested Labour's plan to house 600 migrants at a nearby military site, citing safety and infrastructure concerns. Protesters carried Protect Our Town signs and said the town lacked capacity for such an influx. Green Party Deputy Leader Rachel Millward joined the opposition, sparking accusations of hypocrisy given her party's pro-migration stance. In a joint letter, Millward cited significant risks and dire mismanagement. The Labour government plans to relocate 10,000 migrants to military sites after scrapping the Rwanda deportation scheme and ending hotel accommodation. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick says David Lammy raised more questions than answers in his response to the accidental release of prisoners.
They're Lammy's lags, a whole new category of criminal who can just waltz out of prison despite having the strongest ever checks introduced by this Justice Secretary. The public are being endangered as this circus rumbles on, week after week, with no end in sight. When will he put a stop to it?
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And a very good morning, evening, good evening if you're in New South Wales or with daylight saving in Australia. It's early evening in Queensland. It's 100 years behind and 1 hour behind too. In other parts of the world, wherever you are, thank you for joining us. This is the Protagonists. It's part of the world today. Our topic today, we've done similar before, and I think it's a very important topic that we keep discussing it and hopefully come to some resolution, because most times we don't. The topic is the Palestinian revolution, and is it fanning the flames of a global class struggle? Most want peace in the state of Palestine. However, the prospect of this is highly uncertain, despite the hoopla surrounding Donald Trump's peace plan. So it seems to many that drawn-out negotiations and the struggle of the Palestinians will continue for some time yet. While the world watched the deprivations and unspeakable suffering of the Palestinian people at the hands of Israel and its allies, something changed. A growing number, including past supporters of Israel, demanded the end of the cruelty and violence in Gaza and, importantly, self-determination. With deteriorating economic conditions and millions around the globe subjected to the oppression of the corporate statism, is Gaza then a wake-up call? Hopefully our guest will have a view on whether the prospect of peace in Palestine and self-determination are possible, or if those in power will instead double down to extinguish the flames of a growing revolution. My first guest is Dr. Frank Romano. Frank, thanks for joining us. Frank is an author and Middle East analyst. And Frank, the current situation, because you know more about what's happening there than most people, what is the current situation in Gaza and in the Middle East?
Yes, as you noted, Mike, there's something happening that's far more, it's far beyond just the freeing of Palestine. What's really happening is that the Palestinian struggle is reaching the world. The struggle of the people against the Palestinian people, against the full power of U.S. imperialism and its crony Israel, has become the cutting edge of the global class struggle today. The actions by the imperialism to commit genocide by starvation, as you noted, and drowning the people of Gaza in blood has brought this struggle to the world. So the revolution that we're talking about, what is embedded behind it, and why the U.S. and Israel are so afraid of this revolution spreading, giving the hope of obtaining freedom from colonial imperialistic powers, especially in worsening economic conditions. It means blowing the wind in the sails of popular movements like even in the U.S., in Colombia, Cuba, Brazil, and Middle East countries. But what is going on here? The U.S. and Israel are trying to asphyxiate this growing revolution that they feel is rising to the surface, and by advocating that Gazans must leave the Gaza Strip. Since most of the Gazan Palestinians have manifested they intend to stay, I believe Israel, with the assistance of the U.S., has intensified this extermination of the Gazan Palestinians. Now, what is behind this world structure? Why is Israel and the United States holding on so much to taking over Gaza and the West Bank? Well, if we look at the world power struggle, the roots of the U.S.-Israeli war against Gaza are not so much found in what we see in the news, the ancient prejudices of the Israeli settlers. Now, Netanyahu uses the settlers, often Orthodox Jews, to maintain power over the West Bank and to promote the desire to resettle Gaza. But we often believe that these policies are for ideological reasons. But Netanyahu, with the support of the U.S., they have other reasons in mind. Number one, economics. Number two, real estate. And number three, some way to asphyxiate this growing revolution that you alluded to, Mike. Now, the Gulf region of the Middle East has long been dominated by the imperialist oil companies, big oil. Now, the U.S. and Israel are interested in occupying Palestinian territory and Gaza, because there's sizable reservoirs of oil and natural gas underneath that UNCTAD from the UN has justified, has actually proven. There are a range of about 122 trillion cubic foot with billions of dollars underneath there. But this is not just about oil. Now, the U.S. has often sold, purchased oil, right? And those petrodollars are used to buy arms for the U.S. military industrial complex. And then the Gulf states are using these arms to repress popular revolutions. And we're talking about revolutions that are being ignited by the Palestinian struggle. But there's more to it, Mike and Michael. There's the real estate issue. Now, Smotrich, the Israelis' finance minister, has said the Gaza Strip could be a real estate bonanza. And he says, now we have worked on the demolition phase, now we need to build. Now, in February, Donald Trump said it would be maybe the Riviera of the Middle East. The idea, however, would involve the forced displacement of Palestinians, which is in violation of international law. Now, there's more to it than that. We now have, on November 10th, just a couple of days ago, Trump has sent Jared Kushner as the U.S. mediator who met Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to discuss the fragile U.S.-backed ceasefire in Gaza that we've alluded to. However, Kushner is a former property dealer. He's not an objective party. He has said in a recent interview that Gaza's waterfront property could be very valuable. To make way for the project, he has suggested Israel should remove civilians and clean up the strip. He's even suggested they be shifted to the Negev. Mr. Kushner, however, has avoided any issue with respect to what's going to be the future of Palestinians. In other words, with respect to this real estate, the person who Trump sends, that is Kushner, to help stabilize the truth, has clearly ulterior motives. It's like sending the fox to take care of the hens in the hen house. Kushner desires an interest in this valuable land, and he clearly has no interest in Palestinians and is salivating to get a hold of that prime land Smotrich has talked about. Now, finally, Israel to maintain its power. What is behind the genocide? Well, the desire of the U.S. and big business supporters to maintain political and economic hegemony in the region that we've discussed before. The Palestinian massacre, however, has shed light on the power of the money oligarchy over American values. Even in the United States, they're allowing a genocide. This gives sheds light on the power of the force of the United States in Israel to be able to spin the news and allow the American people to controvert American values in allowing this genocide to take place. Now, finally, to inspire revolutions, October 7th, there was normalization, right, between Israel and several Arab states. For instance, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. After the events of 7 October, however, the Arab and non-states have provided Israel with crucial military and economic support, and normalization now face a far greater challenge in their struggle for internal legitimacy. Because of the Palestinian genocide, the gap between, in particular, Arab rulers and their population has never been wider. So what about the winds of revelation that the whole program is revolving around now? If the Palestinian resistance were to succeed, it would encourage another even more dangerous Arab Spring movement, according to the United States, against the U.S., Israel, and Arab countries, especially those that have normalized in the face of the Palestinian genocide. In conclusion, then, what does the struggle for liberation of Palestinian land resonate in so many hearts that you've alluded to, Mike? So many people are getting involved now more than ever because the liberation of Palestine is a struggle that extends far beyond the territory. People are converging by the millions, flying the Palestinian flags, but also those flags of Lebanon and Sudan, of Congo and Algeria. This imperial rule by oil companies and real estate moguls dominated by the U.S. empire is on one side. The other side is the grassroots struggle of millions of people. So the hotspot of that battle today is led by the Palestinian people and their resistant forces that have become a spearhead of renewal of the anti-colonial, anti-racism struggle in which many are fighting common ground. Palestine is being a rallying cry for souls thirsty for liberation and for a better life. And if Palestinians are all killed in Gaza, the movement has become so powerful that it has ignited the world. There will be no return. There will be no submission, return to domination, because the great anger at the viciousness of this genocide, the annihilation will not be forgotten and we built upon, and hopefully will be built upon to give rise, hopefully, to a freer world.
Our second guest is Dr. Michael J. Sutton, CEO of Freedom Matters today. Michael, thanks for joining us. What's your summary of what's happening and not forgetting that we're here and it's all happening over there, and Frank has been there, and he has been there a couple of times, guest of the Israeli Army Defence Force. And so what's your views on what's happening at the moment, and why do you think the world has become united, which, the obvious fact, but why else is there? Are there other reasons or other similarities to our own life that we can relate to the struggle that the Palestinians are going through? What's your views?
Oh, I just wanted to thank you very much, Mike, for inviting me, and to Frank and Tony for this conversation as well. To put it in perspective, a few nights ago there was a giant branch that fell off the tree, one of our big gum trees, and took out the electricity in our street for a few hours. Everyone was talking about it. It was very upsetting. Then try to imagine, for several years, entire cities without electricity, without running water, without all the daily conveniences that we have. And then, I guess, thinking that the person down the street, the one who lives next door, has been killed, and their house has been blown up, and then the next house has been destroyed, and then the next house, and then the street down the road, and the suburb round the corner, and then the city over the hill. Then you have a bit of an idea of the appalling trauma and suffering of the Palestinian people, which is as a result of the Israeli genocide against them. And there's no equivocation, there's no semantic debate you could have that other than to say that what has been occurring has been intentional genocide of a viciousness and a cruelty and a form of barbarism that we have not seen in quite some time. And what is actually very encouraging, Mike, is that around the world, lots of the people that we have written off, particularly younger people whom we said they're just materialist narcissists, only care about themselves, they're the ones protesting and standing up for the people of Palestine in huge numbers. And people who were normally on the side of Israel have just wrung their hands and said, it is beyond the pale. This is a form of brutality and cruelty and viciousness. I wrote about this a lot with my book, Does God Stand With Israel, but trying to encourage the Christian Zionists, of whom there are many in Australia. I can't really speak for America so much, but Christian Zionism has taken over Protestantism in Australia, particularly in the evangelical and Pentecostal wings, which is astounding. And their support for the Israeli Defence Force and to support for Israeli policy, and also political parties in Australia have been largely, in a sense, captured in some ways to varying degrees by the Israeli lobby. But at the same time, you have this continual movement against what a lot of people rightly see is genocide. And from a Christian perspective, it is really awful, particularly as so many Christians in churches and church leaders are either silent or they're complicit in a policy of genocide, and they argue, well, it's all about the end times. But when you think about it, is Jesus going to come back, walk over the corpses of 20,000 dead Palestinian children and say, "Here I am"? I mean, is that the kind of theology that they promote? And the answer is that it is kind of a twisted view of the world, and that the reality is that if you read the Bible, if you're a Jew or a Christian or Muslim, that the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible and the Quran, we are made in the image of God, and when we are killing people, we're killing people made in the image of God. And what's appalling is that you have, I think what Frank is alluding to and what he is saying is that there are deeper structures and deeper dynamics going on I guess from my point of view, I see essentially this so-called ceasefire is not really the end solution. Trump is not a peacemaker; he's a deal maker, and nothing's for free, as far as Trump is concerned. And as Frank alludes, this is exactly what's going on. There are deals being done. But the other thing that Frank didn't talk about, and what I talk about in my book, and unfortunately is something that afflicts our world, and that is the power of revenge and payback, and the I guess the failure of forgiveness, because I mean I haven't had anyone in my family murdered, thank God. But there are a lot of people in Palestine who've had their children killed, their brothers killed, their mothers killed, their fathers killed, entire families killed, and now they're told, well, sit down, shut up, and don't talk about it. Just get on with your lives. Go off to the desert, or go to Australia, or whatever. But that trauma and that hatred and that vengeance is just going to get worse. And so what we have all this talk about destroying ISIS, not destroying Hamas. Well, there's an entire generation of children and teenagers who are going to grow up wanting to kill Israelis thanks to this conflict, as has happened in the past. And so this war has in fact begetted another generation of people hating Israel. And so the war and the vendettas and the vengeance and everything will just continue. And so I think if we're going to talk about the future of Israel, which I think is highly tenable, is highly is a problematic question. How do you manage the dynamics of payback and vengeance? Because there are a lot of people who have been brutally killed, and we see, of course, with the PLO becomes a Palestinian Authority under Yasser Arafat, and we see that's the Palestinian Authority. The idea of trying to exterminate Hamas. We couldn't get rid of the Taliban or ISIS or Al Qaeda or the Viet Cong or the North Koreans, and so there's this pattern of stupidity that governments are engaged in, and from time to time, mature governments say, okay, well, let's sit down, let's negotiate a settlement, as they did in South Africa. De Klerk goes and releases Mandela, and then you have the new South Africa, or you have Yasser Arafat being the creation of the Palestinian Authority. So there has to be either a path going towards that, or there will just be more killing and death and destruction. And the power of revenge, I don't think people really understand. I mean, this is uncontrollable. And I think perhaps a lot of the people we're in Australia, we're not experiencing this personally, unless we have family in Palestine. But we can protest all we like, but at the end of the day, that dynamic is very real.
Tony Greenstein is an author, campaigner, and historian. Tony, thanks for joining us. You heard from Frank and also from everybody, including myself, and I'm just thinking, we just heard then that the power of revenge, or I suppose hatred even. If you look at what's happening in the US at the moment, we have Donald Trump meeting with the Syrian president, Ahmed al-Sharaa. And he was, if you go back 20 years ago and look at Twin Towers, if you believe that the plane did crash there and knock those towers down, how soon we do forget. Do you think the hatred at the moment in Israel, between Israel and the Palestinians, more from the Palestinians' point of view, I would think, because of the atrocities that were committed, do you think the amount of hatred will just disperse, and that the forgiveness will set in, as Michael mentioned?
Well, the hatred will only disperse when the conditions which allow for and help the hatred disappear. It's the institutions and the very setup of the Israeli state, a Jewish supremacist state, which basically says the Palestinians living inside it are second or third class citizens at best, which sees the Arabs outside, the Palestinians, subhumans. All of that is inherent in Zionism. This isn't, of course, a biblical or a religious struggle. It began at the end of the 19th century, the era of late colonialism. And we should also not forget that the original Zionists were not Jewish, they were Christians. The Christian Zionism predated Jewish Zionism by 4 centuries. And they, in essence, were Christian imperialists. It was post-Reformation. So, I mean, that is really the scene that sets it. That Israel today, the creation first of British and American imperialism, is the West's attack dog in the Middle East. It's there to subdue nationalism, radicalization, revolution, and it's forged relationships with all the corrupt Arab regimes, which are also interested in suppressing their peoples, which is why Palestinian demonstrations in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere have been bitterly suppressed because they're a potential threat to the region. Now, October the 7th, I think one should mention it was the catalyst, it wasn't the cause of what's happening today. And I think that's important to bear in mind that originally the Israeli regime saw their first target as the West Bank and ethnically cleansing that, making life very, very difficult for Palestinians. Bezalel Smotrich had a plan whereby Palestinians were given three options: either to emigrate, to stay as subjects without any rights, or to be killed if they resist. I mean, they were the three options of the neo-Nazi who is in power. Where I think Hamas miscalculated, it saw the demonstrations in Israel over the judicial reforms, saw that Israeli society was divided, and came to the conclusion that October the 7th would be attacking a weakened society divided against itself. And that was a genuine mistake. I mean, they only sought the return of their own hostages, who Israel had long captured, in exchange for theirs. But it immediately became a much more general problem. For a start, immediately after October the 7th, the Israelis engaged in a vast campaign of war or atrocity propaganda. I mean, this was invented by the British in the First World War. In Belgium, German troops were alleged to have bayoneted and murdered Belgian babies. Of course, that proved later to be entirely false, although it had consequences. In the Second World War, when news seeped out of the German extermination camps, many people did say this was just more atrocity propaganda. So I say it had its effect. Israel, after October the 7th, redoubled on that. You will all have heard of the 40 beheaded babies, which is quite remarkable. Since when the Israeli Social Security Institute published its figures of 1139 people killed, there was only one baby, Mila Cohen, in Kibbutz Birim, and she was very much in possession of her head. So unless Palestinians not only severed babies' heads, but attached them back together again, which I think you agree is impossible, then it simply wasn't the case. And yet it was splashed over all the British newspapers, a second Holocaust, as the Daily Mail put it. And this set the scene, if you like, for the atrocities which followed. And of course, we had the rape propaganda. The New York Times, which is always a faithful supporter of imperialism, had screams without silence. And it's taken a lot of effort to debunk this. In the end, Morag Haz, the Israeli Southern District prosecutor, said there are no victims, that we haven't been able to prosecute anyone. No one's come forward. We've done our best. But unfortunately, the media reports are not that which will follow. In other words, there was no rape atrocities to speak. I'm not saying that no one was raped. In war, rape is all too common. But the idea that Hamas in particular was seeking to rape is without any evidence whatsoever. But this set the scene. And we know that Joe Biden actually saw these rape attacks. until it was walked back, as they were told by the State Department, when no evidence of this could be produced. So we've had all these atrocity propaganda nonsense. Just a day ago on Twitter, we had Mike Huckabee retailing the whole lot of them, even though there's no evidence whatsoever. But that allowed Israel to wage a war on Gaza, using Hamas again as a pretext. Because do you really think Hamas was halfway down in a reservoir? Because they destroyed half the reservoirs in Gaza. It beggars belief. Hamas was in the tunnels. So although they say there was a Hamas control center in every single hospital, we've seen no proof, not one Hamas fighter firing out of a hospital. But yet we've seen Israel go in, kill the health workers, take them to secret locations, torture them, and worse. Dr. Adnan Bursch, who died, rape, and God knows what else. Dr. Severe, and many others. And all Western doctors who've gone to volunteer testified to the fact that Israel simply came into hospitals, gave patients no notice to move, whatever their condition, and attacked the doctors and took them off in many cases. So we've had a complete horror show. And the West, Keir Starmer says, "Oh, we have to wait for a court to make a decision." It's absolute nonsense. The whole purpose of the genocide convention was to prevent genocides, not examine them afterwards to see if they were actually genocides. Our rulers are complicit in the war crimes in Israel. They are complicit in every aspect. They're funded, they're fueled, and so on. So of course, people could see through this, and it's produced a mass world movement. And there's no doubt that when I was brought up, and I was a Zionist when I was young, I knew no better. It took me some time to learn that everything I'd been told was lies, that there were no Palestinian refugees running away to let the Arab armies in, as was the favourite story, that they'd been expelled at the point of a gun and with massacres just to help them on their way. The Zionist narrative, in many ways, has died. We've seen where Zionists attack anti-Semitism, and who do they ally with? The anti-Semites. I mean, Amichai Chikli, the diaspora minister, in March, held a conference on fighting anti-Semitism. And who did he invite? All the best anti-Semites. I mean, there is a logic there. If you want to know about anti-Semitism, who better to invite than anti-Semites? But that wasn't quite how it was seen. And in the end, even the Anti-Defamation League was forced, Jonathan Greenblatt, to pull out of it because it was so obviously wrong in a sense. But Israel, of course, is ploughing that furrow because it has no other explanation. I mean, Netanyahu, when he's indicted as a war criminal for a mere 46,000 deaths, immediately turns around and says he's a victim. You're an anti-Semite, pure anti-Semitism, undiluted. So, this is the Israeli narrative, as it were, and people see through it. And we've seen around the world and in Britain increasing repression as a result, whether it's in the United States with the student encampment, whether it's here with the misuse of terror laws. I mean, I'm in court on January the 5th. I'm a terrorist. We've seen Palestine Action was prescribed, a protest group. This is a new move. You prescribe protest groups as terrorists. I mean, that is the action of a complete police state mentality. And of course, you've seen 2,000 people arrested and more pushing back on it. So we now have, most of our terrorists are over the age of 60 or 70. Some are blind, most are disabled, and they are the threat to society as we know it. I mean, so they've got themselves in a tangle, to say the least. And it's very clear what Israel is about. It's ethnic cleansing, not just of the West Bank and Gaza, of course. There's a Greater Israel project, and that means occupation of Lebanon and Syria. And in Syria, we have, of course, an ISIS Al-Qaeda leadership, slaughtering Christians, Druze, and Alawites without a murmur from our leaders. So we are in an age of lies and hypocrisy, and they're busy trying to shut down social media wherever possible. We have Elon Musk. I've gone to my ex Twitter, It's just full of these creatures. I mean, the algorithms have been twisted so that virtually no one gets in between the eyes of these Zionists. But people are not fooled. The takeover of TikTok was similarly motivated. So, I mean, that's a situation. And of course, the Arab regimes are complicit in everything Israel has done, whether it's Jordan, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and so on. So it brings to the fore the question. We're going to see the liberation of the Middle East and the Arab countries. It's not just a battle against the Israeli criminals, it's also against the Arab criminals as well who've allowed it. Because I have no doubt that if the Arab countries had done what they did in 1973 and say the oil stops as of now, the genocide would have stopped.
Frank, off camera, we're talking about a few things, and one of those was that I should ask you why Israel and the Americans want to get rid of the Palestinians. Why would that be? Frank, you need to put your microphone on. If you wouldn't mind, just push that little button that says on.
Yeah, sorry. I'd like to just quickly address what we're talking about, and then I'll get into that. But what Michael and Tony have said, I'd like to put it all together just quickly. The idea of the Israelis twisting things and then going into the hospitals is first of all accusing Hamas of doing what they did. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't address what Shi'at 13, the commandos, did when they intercepted our boats. Now, they were pretty much well trained, but when they handed us off to the police in Ashdod port, and I'm talking about the Global Samud Flotilla movement, which I was a part of, we were manhandled and atrociously treated by the police and beaten, and there was torture before we were finally released later on, about a week later. But this idea that the atrocities were committed by this same commando group, Shi'at 13, and I'll just mention, and so focusing on what Tony had said and Michael as well, that they invaded the Al-Shifa hospital because they were having problems. The Israeli government was having problems. They needed a very vicious force to take care of it. That the Shi'at 13 commandos, they killed babies in cribs. They buried people alive. They killed women, children, and as Tony said, doctors. They targeted medical health workers. Now, I know being mistreated also in prison would be a hypocrite if I didn't say one thing. And now I'm focusing on what Michael said. As we somehow have to turn the leaf a bit. It's easy for me to say this, but forgiveness of this mistreatment is difficult for me to try to convince a Palestinian father who lost his entire family, his wife and his children, and now, forgiveness. But it is important in all the religious texts like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam and others really talking about the importance of forgiveness. And I think that we can address later. We have to get into this as kind of working on finding a resolution and taming down a bit the fires of anger that I, as a father, would have experienced if I lost my family too. And to get back to your question, a very important question, Mike, about what is behind the massacre. Well, this new revolution, Israel and the United States are completely afraid of because they see the winds of revolution touching the entire world. And again, the Palestinians are interested in liberating Palestine, but they've even said, many of the people in Gaza and the West Bank have said, we are really trying to show the world that you can resist against this military-industrial complex. You can resist. And what it is they're really resonating with so many people that are suffering the world today due to this colonialism, whether it could be Cuba, it could be in Brazil, and flaming the winds of revolution, even in the United States, when the Columbia universities and all the universities were contesting what was happening in Gaza. But what's behind it, really, as I said before, also is the will to seize land. And we talked about Kushner being involved, and it's like putting the fox to take care of the hen house, where he is now interceding a little bit and trying to calm down the things in Israel and Palestine according to this truce, according to this ceasefire, when actually he is a real estate mogul. He's looking forward to taking over this valuable land with Smoltrik. But then, so beneath it, also we see in the seas outside of Gaza, there's a huge deposit in gas, and in the West Bank, huge deposit of oil. So we have the reason behind. It's not really about Israel pushing the Israeli Orthodox Jews into the settlements and them feeling, well, we're the chosen few. This is our right to be in the West Bank to overcome situations in the biblical situations, and now we're taking over, and also in Gaza. They really are using these Orthodox Jews in the settlements as a spearhead to get land, because they want that land, Mike, really to develop this land, as Trump said, to make it into the Riviera of the Middle East, and that oil deposits. But I think now, as we've alluded to, all of us have alluded to, the flames of revolution are so powerful. I think United States and Israel are focusing even most on snuffing out the revolution. And since the Gazan people will not leave again at Gaza, they've decided not to. I think they've decided, well, we're just going to have to exterminate as many as we can, and so that we can take over this area, and maybe that will snuff out this growing revolution that resonates in the hearts of so many people.
Michael, what do you think? Because it's and Frankie's right too, but the idea of snuffing them out, isn't that what the ceasefire was all about, or is this just a temporary apparition of humanity and we go back to being barbaric?
Anyway, Frank sort of hit the nail on the head, I think, with a lot of his comments. I mean, it is a class war. It is a real estate grab. It is, of course, the desire to exterminate a people for whatever reason. I mean, I have to acknowledge, of course, that the same thing happened here in Australia and in the United States, Canada, New Zealand. The formation of our states, the desire at one point to eradicate the indigenous peoples of the land, but at the same time, but at the same time, I guess I take comfort from the fact that what's happening in Palestine today it sort of has echoes in the Irish question, the struggle in Vietnam, the apartheid situation. That really what it is. It's not about anything other than the creation of a state or the destruction of a state, and that state is the state of Israel. And if they cannot create a modern state where everyone is welcome and treated as equals under the law, there will be no state of Israel. There will be a kind of a nightmarish regime. What we see today is a lot of the capitalist countries that hitherto were on the side of Israel have now turned their backs on it because of what's happening. And it's actually not that difficult to build a society, considering that there are over 180 examples of it in the world today. And if you want to build a society, you have plenty of examples how to do it. But for some reason, there is this strange desire to literally in a world which is drowning in social media, where everyone's got cell phones, everyone's got the internet, everyone's got TikTok, where they're in real time, happily, gleefully, enthusiastically wiping out an entire population and thinking that they can get away with it. I think there are huge implications for American imperialism. This is unlike any kind of imperialism we've seen before. If the intention is to continue to commit genocide and get rid of the Palestinians, it will be, I think, perhaps the death knell of the West in terms of its, I guess, whatever's left of its moral fiber. We talk about the death of Western civilization. Well, if the West doesn't make a firmer stand and stand up for what is basic human rights of the Palestinian people, then we don't really have the right, in a way, to say that we have any civilization left. as a people, because I mean, and then people say, what's happening in Africa? Yeah, terrible things are happening all over the world. Terrible things are happening here in New South Wales, where the government protests the Palestinian protests, walking across the bridge, and then they allow neo-Nazis to march in front of Parliament without any criticism whatsoever. So terrible things are happening in the world all the time. But it doesn't mean that when we see something as horrific as Gaza, that we turn around and ignore it. This is really the litmus test of the West. And if the West doesn't get it right, I think history will judge the United States in a very negative light. And what's interesting, Albanese, the Labor Prime Minister, making a stand, and I guess at a time when most Australian politicians are, I guess, bowing before Trump as their living saviour, as if he's the living God and they can't say a word against him, Albanese takes the step and defies the United States and recognises Palestine as a state. And it's an incredible thing for him to do. And, I'm a Labor Party voter, but I take my hat off to Albanese. That was a courageous, and it was the right decision to make. And the idea that the Australian Liberal Party, when they get to office, they're going to rescind it and reverse it. I mean, that's completely tone deaf, considering the opinion of the Australian people.
Michael, I just want to ask you, so I don't mean to be, but I just want to ask you, besides rhetoric, a few words here and there, what has he done with regards to Palestine? I'm just thinking that, is this just again, and I'll also ask Tony about this, is this just politics 101? We'll say the right thing, but really, what's been done?
Who's this, Trump or Albanese?
Albanese. I mean, I'm not an Albanese fan. Neither am I a fan of the Conservatives, if you could call them that. But I mean, Albanese and the others, we support blah blah. What's been done? What actually has been done besides a few words?
Well, Australia takes a very fragile relationship with the United States. It's a topic for a much
rare earth minerals. We've just signed a very big deal with Donald Trump. Reports are from the legacy media that Donald and Albo are best buddies. So we know what Donald Trump's view of Israel is in the Middle East, and that he'll be the next Messiah if he's not already walking across the Nile. But I'm just thinking though, what's Albo done? And will the rare earth mineral deal? Will you see a silent backstep, a more smoke and mirrors? He hasn't done anything. I mean, really, it's just words. It's like most.
Can I just say from an economics point of view, I guess there are basic strategic realities that the governments engage in, and that trade deal is part of that I guess continuing supply in terms of maintaining American imperialism. American imperialism needs the rare earth minerals to secure its position vis-a-vis China and Russia. It was kind of an inevitable. I mean, who are we going to sell it to? Russia? The Chinese? No, that's not going to happen. So there are basic fundamental realities that Australia is a vassal or a ally or what would you like to call it? Friend? What's the term? Of the United States. But within that, there is a degree of maneuverability in terms of politics. And I think that only Albanese could have pulled off the recognition thing. But it doesn't mean that he is against America or for America. I think that's just the reality of it.
You and I could have a great discussion here, but I will zip my lip at the moment because we will run out of time. Tony, I wasn't going to ask you this, but we have all these words. Can you tell me? I'd just like to see what's been done, except for Donald walking across the Nile and create peace in the Middle East.
Well, Keir Starmer has recognised the Palestinian state, and it is a form of words. It means nothing. He's continued to supply weapons, He hasn't cut the trade links with Israel. He's given it political support. He refers back all the time to October the 7th, never mentions atrocities against Palestinians. So, no, I mean, recognizing a state that doesn't exist is really not very helpful. It's just a public relations exercise and hasn't affected the situation on the ground in the West Bank, where the repression is increasing day by day. And that's really the important thing. So I do think it is a really gesture politics, nothing more. Look, let's look at the Zionist movement. It was created at the end of the 19th century, the Jewish Zionist movement, and it spoke about Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, not about the state of Israel. And the state of Israel is the only state in the world which doesn't have defined borders. And Netanyahu has been quite clear that he wants a greater Israel, and a greater Israel. Well, you can debate what its parameters are, but one version is from the Litani across to the Euphrates running down Iraq and down to the Nile in Egypt. So there is plenty more room for expansion. But the limits on Israeli expansion are set by the West. And if the West goes along with Israel's attacks on its neighbours, and they have done, they've done that in Syria, they've done that in Lebanon, they've installed, in essence, an Al-Qaeda government in Syria under Giuliani. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. If Israel gets away with expulsions and ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, and so far no one's raising any real objections, then the next point of conflagration will be across the Jordan. And then Israel, as a result of security concerns, will need to defend itself against Jordanians. So the process goes on. And we have, in the West, have to call a stop because we know that international law has proved utterly useless. We have a situation where Trump is sanctioning the ICC, sanctioning Albany, the Italian human rights rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, I think her name is. And to be quite honest, Trump pays no regard whatsoever to international law, as we're seeing with the attacks in Venezuela. So there is a kind of growing authoritarianism in the world. It's bound up with increased imperialism, conflicts with China, so far trade wars, certainly with Russia over the Ukraine, which was entirely manufactured by the West to begin with when they expanded NATO. So we live in a very difficult situation worldwide. Within the West, there is mass support, like the strikes in Italy, the refusal of Greek dockers to load weapons, which are encouraging. So we have to build a worldwide and a European-wide protest movement which can challenge these governments. And we've seen in New York the victory of Mamdani, despite the Zionists spending millions of pounds on his opponent, the corrupt Andrew Cuomo. So we shouldn't all be downhearted. It is possible to fight back, but the question is what form that fight back takes.
Yeah, I do agree. Frank, is this a call to arms at the moment, or are we? Is it just because the world is restless and we've always had protests, or is there something deeper than that we are seeing? We're just seeing big government, big corporations, atrocities committed. A few words thrown around by the Western leaders, and then after that, we just have we just have what we have. We have a nothingness, and before you know it, I think the ceasefire will probably finish in some way, and we'll go back to killing innocent people. Is it a call to arms? Are we actually saying we've got to do something, or is it just because of the communications these days with TikTok and X and all those things? Or is there something deeper? Frank, you need to turn your microphone on.
I'm sorry, there is something deeper, and to kind of piggyback onto what Tony said, This idea is almost like a catalyst where people like Starmer and also Albanese are recognizing the state of Palestine when people are no longer duped to the fact that this is all politics and that the state of Palestine has already been considered a state. And even though people are saying, well, there's no state, no, it has been recognized by the General Assembly of the UN, UNESCO, and because the ICC can accept complaints by the state of Palestine, Palestine is a state. But people are, the call to arms that you're referring to, Mike, is that people are no longer duped to these political type of gestures that are basically meaningless. Let's look at more specifics. When we were on the Global Samud flotilla in the middle of the Mediterranean, and we were bombed outside of Crete, and the boat I was on, the Spectre, was one of the boats. There were 5 boats that were so bombed. I was one of the boats that was bombed. All of a sudden, a country that is led by a real Zionist, Miss Meloni, all of a sudden completely revolted, completely went ballistic, to almost, and that coerced Meloni to send a naval boat to quotes unquotes protect us. But of course, as soon as we got to the orange zone, along with the Spanish boats, the Turkish boat, and the Greek boat, they turned back. But the whole idea that was very significant to say, if this is a call to arms when a whole country revolts that is being led by a Zionist, forcing that Zionist to send a boat, even if that boat didn't really have no little impact on defending us, because then we saw what happened when we got close to Gaza. It was a very strong message, and I believe it is a call to arms in that regard, that specific pressure is taken as the pressure that Tony and Michael and you have alluded to, this pressure from the social forces that is gelling together. And again, with the Palestinian struggle resonating in so many hearts against colonialism, it has become a call to arms. And I hope we can keep up the momentum, because the risk is that the folks that were on this boat, the Global Samud flotilla and the Freedom Flotilla boat, the Conscience, and we were all intercepted and then sent into prison with all those consequences, and then we were eventually deported. We need to keep up the momentum. I think it became one of the catalysts that Tony and Michael have been referring to for this call to arms. I think somehow we have to keep the media fresh on it and keep working on it. And with your help, Mike, with the panels, getting the word out, I think we have to be hopeful that we're not just throwing out words, the words from Starmer, word from Albanese about recognize. It's more to it than that. And we saw a manifestation of that is also, as Tony alluded to, the election of a Muslim as mayor of New York, in spite of the millions that were spent. And me going back and forth to New York as a New Yorker, and also I'm from California and from France, see the power of the Zionists in New York. This is a very strong statement. And I think it does underline this idea of tangible manifestations of this call to arms.
Michael, you deal with clergy and all those, young and old. It's not just because if you look at protests, generally they are by the younger folk. We have all walks of life. I don't know whether you call it a protest or whether it's just a support of, or a combination of both. What has been noticeable to you? Because people protest, Western society protests just about anything. This is, in my mind, eclipses the days of Vietnam when they had those protests. This is just, to my mind, is a very powerful statement from a cross section of the community. Yes. What is it? Have we found something in this day and age other than ourselves?
I think that's a really good question there. There are a number of features that are different with Vietnam. One is that there is a very large diaspora of Palestinians around the world, and people from that part of the world. And so it's not just something happening in another country, it's their own families who are being killed, their own brothers and sisters, their own friends. Then also the internet has radically transformed the way we view the world as well. And so that's why governments want to ban it. That's why we have this movement to ban and restrict it. That's why in Britain there are all these new laws to, I guess, prosecute people who say the wrong thing with Twitter. I know in Australia too, there are movements within organisations to stifle debate. You're not allowed to have an opinion. You're not allowed to say anything. If you do, if you really want to be offended, read my book, Does God Stand with Israel? That's a very controversial book. That's my statement. I will not I don't have children, but I will in the future. I will not lie to my children or grandchildren. I want to say what needs to be said for their sake and for the future. And I think I speak for many people around the world, and particularly in Australia and in the West, is that the other thing I think, Mike, is that there is a lot of sterility coming through with media, with movies, with entertainment. People are sick of the old movies, and no one goes to the cinema anymore. We're sick of Netflix. We're sick of all those things. We're craving, and then there's the advent of AI, which has destroyed so much. And so people are craving authenticity and something real. And I think people are really going back to what's important. And there is, I guess, a reviewing of what is important, and how you treat other people is becoming, once again, central to our human experience. And this probably has to do with the fact that materialism, consumerism, the internet revolution has all proven to be completely false. It has offered the false panacea to our problems. It's offered nothing. And so people are going back to, I guess, fundamental questions of the human condition. And one is, as the Bible teaches and what Jesus taught and what Moses taught, and that is the loving other people, and being good, showing kindness and love. Jesus said, "Love each other as I have loved you." Moses said, "Love your neighbor as you are loved, as you expect to be loved," and so on. And so people are going back to these fundamental human experiences and expressions. And I think that, unfortunately, for government is a real problem, because there's nothing more powerful than humans coming together and building communities, building a sense of value, and then starting to see that the suffering of others is their concern and is part of their own identity as a human being and as a community. And that is really, in a sense, the failure of capitalism. Capitalism is dead, and the idea of the narcissistic individualism, all that matters is me, that's gone. I think we're seeing the emergence of something quite profound, that people are once again looking outside of themselves and saying, well, what's happening overseas, that's important to me and to my family and my kids and my generation. And unfortunately, governments can't control that. They're certainly trying to, but there may be hope for the rise of new leadership imagine a new statesman in America, someone who is not like what we've seen for a long time, or even in Europe. But we have all these useless politicians that we talk about. It just, as you say, just mouthing the platitudes. What we need is not just, I guess, a new way of thinking, but we do need new leadership to steer us forward.
Tony, you're a historian. What can we learn from history to move forward?
Well, I suppose we can learn from history that throughout history is, if you like, there are two forms of history. There's the history of great people and the history of social struggles and social movements. And in the past, things like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so on, have been at the core of the struggle of different classes, whether it was a peasant revolt in Britain, the Chartists, the suffragettes, and so on. And massive attempts by the ruling class in terms of things like the Coercion Acts, the Stamp Act, the attempts to control the printing press. That was very true in the 18th century, the radical corresponding societies. So there is a continuing tension between, if you like, the ruling elites, which want to keep the populace ignorant, and movements from below, which seek to expand their rights and democratic rights, the right to vote, for example, universal suffrage, the right of women to vote, and so on. So we're seeing that as well in the mass Palestinian solidarity movements and the attempts of the ruling states and the ruling classes to clamp down on it. You've seen that certainly in Germany, where the police invaded the Palestine Congress to prevent the proceedings going ahead. And they barred, I think it was Yassin Abu Sitta, from entering Germany. Likewise, Zanis Farouk Farkis, sorry, I'm getting his name wrong, also was refused entry and banned. And this is the police force in Berlin taking upon itself to really replicate the activities of the Gestapo, because of course the German police were incorporated into the SS. So you have these battles. You have it in Britain with the prescription of Palestine Action as a terrorist group, and the activities of the Metropolitan Police in arresting over 2,000 so-called terrorists. So there's, in every generation, you see the forces of resistance growing up, and you do, especially over the Palestine question, because the Palestine movement has been the biggest movement there's been certainly since the anti-apartheid struggle 40 odd years ago. So we're seeing that again. But we're also seeing, of course, the never-ending wars that the West wages in order to plunder the resources of the Middle East and Africa. And so the question of the replacement of imperialism and capitalism comes to the fore. And that really is the struggle that we need to conclude. Not only that, but for the preservation of human life on this earth, because we're getting closer now to a World War III than we've ever been. And it doesn't take much to spark a nuclear war as well, when we could see a nuclear winter. So, I mean, the stakes are very high because capitalism is a destructive organization, a socio-economic system, which destroys as well as creates. And it uses technology not to benefit humanity, but to benefit those who can control humanity.
We're going to wrap it up very shortly. Gone over time. There's my guys waving at me. But Frank, I saw, we're talking about the peace deal and all that sort of stuff. Do they actually, and this is a question for our panel, do they actually want peace? What is the end game out of all of this, Frank?
That is a loaded question, Mike. This it truly is, as we said before. If there was a true will to peace by the leaders, in particular the United States and Israel, we would have it very soon. But we see all these interests that we've alluded to, whether it be oil interests, real estate interests, that have got in the way. So this is what's stalling a lot. But as Michael had said, that what the world is focusing now on realism, I have to add a personal experience. And I've retired as a lawyer and a professor, except I do represent the Palestinian people before the International Criminal Court and proceeding with those complaints against Netanyahu and others. I'm back to my original profession, which is acting. And so when I was called to Malta, remember when the Conscience was bombed, we were supposed to get on that boat, and then I was called to work on the Madeleine, finally on the Hondola as the owner, and then got to Gaza, and then finally after that, the Global Samud Flotilla. I postponed a film I was working on, and this sort of gets to what Michael was talking about. I realized that as an actor, and I've gone back to my original profession. Before I became a lawyer, I was a professional actor in Paris, doing classics like Bourgeois Gentilhomme and so forth. I've gone back to acting, but I postponed the movie about Palestinian resistance to do more, I have more of an impact on reality, as Michael was alluded to. And I believe as this desire for human beings to be more involved directly, not through demonstrations. There's hope that people are starting to really mobilize to do really get physically and mentally involved themselves, and not vicariously through film. This is going to make a big impact, and this is going to push. And this is sort of gets to your question, Mike, that we're going to push the leaders, whether they like it or not, with this. With hopefully, we'll have enough impact on public opinion and social mobilization to push the leaders to do what they've got to do to really get back to humanitarian interests that and spiritual interests that Michael has been talking about all along, and hopefully we will come. It will be forced to come to a peace that we all will want and desire, because humanitarian interests will finally become a priority over the capitalistic interests for money, power, nourished by greed.
Michael, I just want to ask you a question. It's two parts, probably loaded also, so I apologise. No, I don't. Have we actually, has the West lost its, and most notably the governments, you're looking at the US administration, the UK administration, Australian administration, have we actually lost our sense of direction? There's no moral compass. It's everything's upside down, as somebody once told me. The West has gone upside down, and things that were right are wrong. Things that were wrong are now right. That then would influence, because again we get back to words, and if you have a moral compass, you need sometimes more than words. You actually have to do more than just talk, because words are cheap. Have we lost our moral compass? Have we lost our, some would say, our will to change things and be happy enough just with that conversation? And we might, clench our fist and whatever, but at the end of the day, going back to my discussion with you, just words.
Yeah, that's a good question there, Mike. I think everyone's responsible for their actions. We're accountable beings. As a Christian, I believe we're accountable before God, and we have to stand before Him one day and give an account of our lives. Also, think that peace is something that can only be found in the heart of a person. You can't really expect someone to change unless they're changed by God. That's my view. But when a person is changed by God, that they are completely different. And when you see, I guess, what's happening in Gaza and what we've been talking about, how to move forward, is it possible? I mean, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of change. There is always the possibility of peace. But every generation is responsible for making the right decisions. And I don't know I think there is definitely whether the West fails or succeeds with the question of Palestine is history will judge this very severely. But whether the West itself has lost its compass, it's a very deep question. I think that everyone's responsible for making the decisions that are right or wrong. And we're all accountable beings. But I think that every generation thinks that they're the center of the universe, and what we're doing here is, I guess, it's never been done before. But the struggle of the Irish, the struggle of the Vietnamese, the struggle of the people of East Timor, the struggle of what happened in South Africa. In every case, what needed to happen, there needed to be people willing to, I guess, change. And they changed. And we can say, no progress has ever been made. But we're South Africa, Ireland, East Timor, examples of countries that did change and that did move forward. And there was the baptism of fire and the death and the killing and the violence. But as a Christian, I don't believe peace is achievable in this world without God. But at the same time, people who are moved by faith or by the love of others can make a difference, and they can make a difference in their own personal lives and the lives of those around us, around them. And that's how the world moves. As even the flotilla changed the hearts of so many people around the world moving forward. It's the decisions that each person can make that has an impact on the world, and that's why people matter, and our decisions matter.
Tony, do they really want peace? And if not, what's the end game?
Do they? Who are they?
They are Israel and the US, for example.
Oh no, Israel doesn't want peace. Israel wants land. I mean, the Greater Israel Project. I mean, it started off with a land without a people for a people without a land, and that was a biblical land. So, does Netanyahu want peace? It would be very difficult to argue that case, I think. So, no, I don't think there's any great hope that he does. He wants to see maximum land and minimal number of Arabs. I mean, I think that's really his slogan. Does Donald Trump want to see peace? Does American imperialism? No, because its wealth derives from that which other people produce, in a sense. So he wants an unequal relationship with the rest of the world and the promotion of as many corrupt, collaborating client regimes who will keep the people of the Arab East and elsewhere, from the resources that they're entitled to. I mean, that's what the Gulf Sheikdoms are about, keeping the people from the wealth. So, no, I don't think so. I mean, you have to create an alternative social system, and I'm afraid in that system, it's not a question of religion, because religion's used to legitimize oppression as well as sometimes the vehicle to oppose it. But it is really about replacing capitalism, which is inherently an exploitative economic and political system. So that is the hope, because if we don't do that, then the world is going to be overcome with the climate crisis. We're already seeing, I mean, the effects of it, these massive hurricanes and so on. It will only get worse. And Donald Trump's only answer to it is drill, baby, drill. So what can you say?
Brilliant discussion. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Dr. Frank Romano, Dr. Michael J. Sutton and Tony Greenstein, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Tomorrow we'll do more with other topics, talking about all sorts of uncomfortable subjects, but I think we have to do it, and I think we have a platform to do it at the moment. For how long? We don't know. Maybe after December 10, Michael, we may not have that, or the 27th of December, when they make going to a search engine, you have to have your biometrics to show you that you are above 16, which is incredible. How to kill the internet. And think about it, we actually invented it. So we're going to kill it first. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. This has been The Protagonist on The World Today. Thank you.